Now, Sports Talk with Broads. Here's Hunter Brody.
What is going on, everyone? Let's talk some Sixers basketball. But before we do, I want to get a couple announcements out of the way. One, please stay safe. Please stay safe out there. Make sure you are taking care of your bodies. You are staying quarantined. You are isolating yourself, not getting too close to family members and people. Just stay safe. This is getting so hectic, so crazy, and it's really hard to even process where we are today. I remember going to that last Sixers game against the Pistons, and you felt like there was some nervousness in the building, but I would have never imagined in a million years it would be to where we are right now. So, first off, stay safe, please. Wash your hands, take care of your body, do the things you need to do, and let's pray that this thing comes to an end sooner rather than later, although it does seem like it will be a couple more months. Number two, this is actually a really big announcement. So, myself and Daryl Reynolds, he was a Villanova national champion in 2016, the year Chris Jenkins hit the buzzer beater. We are working on a podcast together. Make sure you go and follow our Twitter account for the podcast at Processed 76ers. On that Twitter account, we will be having giveaways. We will be putting out highlight packages of the Sixers. We will also keep up with the news, and we will drop our podcast there as well. It will be on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, any platform out there for podcasts, and the visual will be uploaded on this YouTube channel. The first episode is going to drop April 6th, which is this Monday coming up. I'm super excited. It's going to be phenomenal. We are going to have so much fun, first off, but also we have so many great ideas and concepts and interviews involved, getting people on the podcast, since he is very connected with the NBA world, college basketball world. It will be a very awesome listen, so be on the lookout for that, and do not forget to follow the Twitter account at Processed76ers. Now, let's get into the topic. I feel like this is an interesting one, and I've had this opinion for a long time when it comes to the process. And the question is, what makes the process successful to you? Because to me, I feel like the process was all about having a team and getting talent, getting cornerstone pieces that will put this organization in a position to compete for years to come, and not just compete in the 8th seed or the 7th seed, because in the NBA, that's where you do not want to be. You don't want to be stuck in the middle where you don't get draft picks and you don't get over that hump and you're just stuck in the middle of the pack. No. You want to get to the top of the draft, pick those superstars, and from there be in a position to compete every single year. So it's not about just winning the championship. Of course, that's the ultimate goal. But to make the process successful in my eyes, it's just get superstars, get top-tier talent, and from there be in a position to make playoffs every year and go on legit runs. Once again, I understand that the ultimate goal is to win a championship, but in terms of what the process was all about, it was getting high draft picks, getting these superstar players so that they will be able to then start going after the title and making these legitimate runs towards the ultimate goal. It doesn't mean they have to 100% do it. That's hard to do. That's hard to ask. I want them to. Let's clarify. I want them to, and that's what the prize essentially is at the very end. But if I get 10 years, 12 years of getting to the Eastern Conference Finals, getting to the NBA Finals, not winning it, but getting there a couple times. Like, that's what it's all about in my eyes. It was about acquiring the talent that was able to get to that spot, so you're no longer stuck in that 8th seed, in that 7th seed, in that 9th seed. That's not what people want to hear. Nobody wants to hear, bro, how can you be satisfied about just getting there and not winning it? That's not my point. From a fan's perspective, I want them to win, all right? I love the 76ers. I want them to win the title so we can have a championship down Broad Street, so I can go crazy, so I can drink some Bud Lights, Miller Lights, Coors Lights, IPAs, you name it. I want to be able to just enjoy that moment, see all the fans, a sea of blue, if you will, maybe some red in there, maybe some white also. I'm not saying that I don't want them to win a championship. But when we take a step back and we look at what this was all about, what was it all about? No longer being in that 8th seed, no longer being in that 7th seed and getting smoked and getting crushed. And this season, it was underwhelming. But long term, I don't think that they're going to be in that 5th seed, 4th seed. With the growth of these players, with the growth of Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, you will start seeing this team being 3rd seed, 2nd seed, maybe even 1st seed throughout their growth as superstars. Nobody likes to hear that either, but that's been something I've been really harping on for a long damn time. Ben Simmons at age 27 to 33, it's going to be unbelievable. It's going to be stellar. It's going to be lethal. And it just takes time. It's as if the process was fast forward, and you can say that Elton Brand was a reason why that was the case, but it did seem like there was no middle ground. It strictly went from the process to, okay, here we go, okay, championship. And there wasn't enough conversation apparently in the growing part of that, because that's how this league works statistically. It is proven. It is facts. There are facts to prove this, that when you have superstars that bring you to a championship, when you have superstars that carry organizations to the promised land, they are in a specific age. And that's because it's a grown man's league. Look at LeBron. Look at Steph Curry. Look at Kawhi Leonard. When they brought a franchise to the title and won it, they are in that 27 age range. 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32. These are the age groups. These are the ages where a man dominates the league. Don't tell me that Kawhi Leonard won it with San Antonio, because that's always a counter argument. He did win it with San Antonio, and sure, he was a fun defender to watch against LeBron James. They had Ginobili. They had Tony Parker. They had Tim Duncan. You are talking about Hall of Fame players. Hall of Fame guys. That is an iconic trio. Kawhi Leonard had a huge impact on that series. But when I talk about players dominating and making sure they are the reasons why the organization goes to the next level, it's on those players, Joel and Ben Simmons, and they are just not ready yet. So let's dive back more towards the process and everything that really occurred in terms of the process. When you look at 2014, right, because that's when it sort of all started happening. Some trades occurred in 2013 that really started to kick this thing off. Drew Holiday, Nerlens Noel was in the mix. But 2014, they get Joel Embiid at 3. And I always laugh at the fact that people bring up how many top picks they had. They did have a lot of top picks, but when you pick 3, you only get what falls in your lap. Andrew Wiggins went 1. Who went 2nd? Jabari Parker. 4th was Aaron Gordon. Dante Exum was 5 that year. You can only sit there and wait to see what falls on your lap. They landed Joel Embiid with the 3rd pick. And I bring that up because, do you know how many times it's been told or it's been discussed they butchered everything. They ruined everything. They picked Jahlil Okafor. They picked this guy. They picked that guy. Unless you have the first overall pick, which they only had 2 times, and yes, they totally screwed up that Markelle Fultz pick, but that was fluky, that was odd, and that was just so random. Okay, the kid dominates at Washington. He puts up a ton of numbers. He looks great, and then all of a sudden the dude forgets how to play basketball. That's nobody's fault. If you got the player that played at Washington and didn't have the yips or didn't have that motorcycle accident, whatever you want to believe actually happened, you would be successful and you would have that secondary guard with Ben Simmons. That is so fluky. That's 1 in a billion chance. And guess what? It so happened to land with the Philadelphia Sixers. But when we go back to that draft, 2014, you get Joel Embiid and it falls right onto your lap. Awesome. Fantastic. And if you remember, there was a delay on the TV screen when he was watching the draft. So when the Sixers picked him, he looked miserable and his face was just down. But that's because he didn't hear the news yet. But it's just funny looking back at that time thinking, oh man, I remember everybody going nuts. Is this kid even going to want to enjoy this? Is he going to even appreciate the atmosphere here in Philadelphia? Is he going to be able to not really so much comprehend, but embrace how brutal we could be at times or how passionate we could be at times? Well, let's just say everything clearly worked out. But moving on to 2015, Jahlil Okafor at 3. Karl Anthony Towns went 1. D'Lo went 2. Kristaps Porzingis went after Okafor at 4. And the one in the draft that I feel like, okay, I'm obviously disappointed, but this is how drafts work. This happens all the time. There's always one guy like this every single year. You can look at Steph Curry, and the same thing happened with him. Devin Booker went 13. Plenty of teams missed out on him. Nobody would have known he was at that spot. When you look at that draft in that moment, you get the 3rd pick. Cat goes first. D'Lo goes second. Jahlil Okafor fell on their laps. It's not the Sixers' fault that Jahlil Okafor was the pick at that moment. Kristaps didn't want to work out with the Sixers. Okay, so you pick one of the best players in college basketball who played for Duke. It just worked out that way. In 2016, it was Ben. No brainer. Don't tell me Brandon Ingram. He scores points at this point in his career, but what does that do? How does that relate to wins? It hasn't. It hasn't. He's improved. It doesn't really relate to wins, though. It didn't work in Los Angeles, and he's scoring buckets in New Orleans, but it's not as if the dude is correlating with wins. And Fultz was a disaster, but I still don't blame the Sixers for that move. It was a logical move that, as I stated, a 1 in a billion chance happened, and it so happened to be with this organization. The reason why I bring up those numbers and the years, there's this narrative out there that the Sixers tanked for 10 billion years. It took them 75 billion years to build this, and all they have to show is Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. That is true. All they do have to show is Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, and really, when I say that, I almost gasp for air. What? Only Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid? Stop it. It's not just only. Those are 2 huge stars. Potential superstars, I'd say. They're stars. Potential superstars, though. In 2013, once again, the reason why I bring this up is this. It wasn't that long of a tank. In 2013, 2014, it started. They went 19-63. In 2014 and 2015, they went 18-64. And in 2015 and 2016, they went 10-72, which was a disaster. It was awful. You can go to a game for a penny on StubHub. You can bring 100 friends for $1, buy tickets up at the top, and then you walk down because nobody was in the building. 3 seasons of disgusting basketball. It wasn't that long. So you tank for 3 brutal years and you end up with Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. I would do it again in a heartbeat, even if it doesn't mean they absolutely win a title. I put up a poll on the Sixers Twitter page for our podcast at Processed 76ers once again. And 106 votes came in. 19% of the votes said all they need to have this process become successful is playoffs every year. Playoff runs every year. Getting to the Eastern Conference Finals. Getting to the Eastern Conference Finals. Getting to the NBA championship but losing. Getting to the NBA championship again and losing. Going to the Eastern Conference Finals. Maybe mixing in a win. Just because I say all they need to do is make legit runs, that doesn't mean that a title can't come into play. Of course it can come into play. Absolutely it can. It doesn't shut out that scenario from happening. It's not make deep playoff runs but never winning. Winning is totally on the table. It's just the fact that the reason they did all of this was to stop being in the middle of the pack. Stop coming in the 8th seed, playing the 1st seed in the first round of the playoffs. So they did win the 1 year with Iguodala, but it doesn't count because Derrick Rose got hurt. The Bulls were completely banged up, and it was a fraud win, if you will. They were frauds, really. You don't want to be stuck there, and then you don't want to be drafting 15 where you get middle-of-the-pack guys, and you don't get much better. You get stuck in a specific spot, and in the NBA, that is the worst place to be. So at that point, when you are a front office member, the thought process is, let's stink. Let's get players who could potentially change this franchise, who can sell tickets, who can make playoff runs, and let's be involved with the top seeds in the East. That's what it's all about. It doesn't mean that I am canceling out what it means to win a championship. That is the goal. That is the ultimate prize that we all want. We watch every single game, every dribble, every possession, every defensive play, every saved ball, every three-pointer, because we want to go through the journey with these players and with these coaches and with the logo on the front of the jersey. So at the end of the day, we can watch them compete for a title. And if they do get the chance to win that title, all right. I just feel like it needs to be understood that it doesn't happen when your point guard is 23 years old. It doesn't happen. Your leader is 23. It doesn't happen. Facts and statistics will show you that. He needs to add to his game. He needs to continue to develop. Same with Joel Embiid, who's 25. The problem with him is it's a little more nerve-wracking because of the injury history, because of a 7'2" guy running up the floor at this crazy pace, and one night he looks so fatigued and out of shape. The next night he's banged up and can't even play. You don't really know how long of a career he's going to have in comparison to, say, Ben Simmons, who gives you 40-plus minutes a night. He's very active. It seems like he's got a motor that never ends. He never runs out of gas. He always has his foot down on the pedal. So it's two totally different extremes for the guys. I know for Joel Embiid's sake, it's hard to say, well, give him 4 more years. Give him 3 more years to see where he's at. With a body like him, it could be going the other way at that point, which is scary. I just know because I've studied the league, I've watched the league, I've watched what superstars win the title every year, and there is a growing pain part of this. Michael Jordan did not just go 6 for 6 and win the NBA title every time. Well, he did when he got to the NBA title. How many times did he get swept? He got swept before, absolutely. How many times did he lose in the playoffs? He lost in the playoffs. He got beat up big time. He got beat up by some teams, some big-ass teams back in the day with that physical play. There were growing pains involved with Michael Jordan. There were growing pains involved with LeBron James. There's so many. Kawhi Leonard even. It is a big part of this game. And the process, the part of the draft picks, I think that worked. At this point, I absolutely think that worked. Just acquiring Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, that part of it worked. Now you look at the next stage. I guess we can break this up into stages. You got the draft pick part of it after the actual tanking method where they were miserable and tough to watch, and you couldn't even keep up with the schedule or the games. Now you have more of the growing part of it. And maybe it's a good thing that Elton Brand went out there and kind of rushed it, because then it's more of, listen, you're with the big boys now. You got a lot of pressure on you. Let's see if you can handle it. Sort of like throwing these cats into the fire. Not literally cats as in the animal. I'm talking about them as players, Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, throwing them into the fire of a hostile environment, a ton of pressure, a lot of media, a lot of national coverage games, and saying, hey, man, this is it. I mean, this is what it's all about. This is where you learn. This is where you're going to grow as a player, as an individual, as a professional, as a guy off the court, all around. This is how you're going to grow. We're not going to give you a long leash and kind of give you 500 feet to play with. No, we're going to give you a short leash, and we're going to say, this is the time. For this specific season, it seemed to not really work. I love comparing this squad, though. I don't love comparing them to them, but it makes the most sense. I like comparing this year's team to last year's Celtics team. Who was questioned? Brad Stevens. for being able to, or for not being able to, keep that locker room together. Kyrie Irving leaves, and look at the Boston Celtics this year. I feel like coming into the year, there was so much hype, so much pressure, and this happens all the time in every league around sports. The media pressure, the hype, this team's going to be great, this team's going to be elite. You hear it all off season long, and it doesn't work that way. It doesn't flow that way. You underachieve. Maybe you smelled yourself a little bit too much throughout the off season, and you can't get things going. I don't feel like this team is just a disaster for the rest of the time, for the rest of this roster construction, just because they're having a hard time this year. The Boston Celtics literally just did what I am saying the Sixers can do with what's happening now. They had a horrific season followed by a really good season. You got your players playing well again. Maybe if this offseason isn't filled with the drama and all the hype around the team, they come in with more of an underdog role. I hate to bring that up because I feel like that's the only way the Eagles succeed is when their backs are against the wall and nobody believes them. But there's something to be said about that compared to being a heavy favorite. Compared to being a team that everybody talks about as they're going to blow out this team. Look at their starting five. How is anyone going to beat them? They're going to be an unstoppable force. I am missing the Sixers big time. And I feel like this is a great opportunity to kind of kickstart this podcast that I'm doing with Daryl Reynolds. I'm super pumped up about it. I really am. I have this gut feeling. So I'll share this with you real quick. When I started this whole YouTube channel and I started this whole sports talk stuff on my own, I had this gut feeling where if I pursued this heavily, if I really wanted to make this happen, I will make this happen. I felt so good about it. And when you feel good about something and you have this gut feeling and you trust it, you know. You just know. And with this 76ers podcast with D-Ray, I feel that. I feel the same way I felt about this YouTube channel as a whole. So that's why I'm super excited about it, and I want to keep pushing it. I want to keep throwing it out there. Make sure you go follow at Processed76ers on Twitter. I can't wait to drop the first episode. We're going to be keeping everyone involved with Sixers conversation, NBA conversation throughout this horrible process that we are going through right now. And no pun intended on the process thing. I've been watching old Sixers games, even some new Sixers games. And when I say new, I'm talking about this recent season. And I talk about the narrative and going into the season, what it's like. The noise, hearing the noise. I watched their playoff series in 2018. Dario Saric was in there. Robert Covington was in there. And watching Ben Simmons with Joel Embiid, it was a different feel. We were so excited as a city to finally have basketball like this again. We went through 10-win seasons, 18-win seasons, 19-win seasons. Although it felt like 2 billion years, it was 3 seasons. In 2016-17, they won 28 games, which is not a lot. Joel Embiid played, though, and he was exciting. He was must-watch television. You tuned in every time the Sixers had a game because he was so unbelievable to watch. You had one of the guys that you drafted finally. Ben went through some injury trouble. Joel went through some injury trouble early. There was that phase where every single rookie that got drafted by the Sixers ended up having some sort of injury where they had to miss part of the season or the full season. So it was finally like an entertaining time. It was 28 wins, but it was an entertaining 28 wins. It wasn't a 10-win season, 18-win season. There was more juice involved. People were going to the Wells Fargo Center. People went nuts to finally have a guy that you can watch dominate a game on a nightly basis, which was unreal to watch at the time based off of the 3 seasons prior. Going back to that 2018 series, though, against Miami, even against Boston, even though they had a tough time against Boston and it wasn't pretty, watching Ben and Joel in those moments, monstrous moments, explosive dunks, big-time plays, it felt different because the expectations weren't there. And now the expectations should be where they are. I do think it needs to start trending towards, all right, Ben, How many years have you played now? Let's take that next jump. Let's take that next step. But I always thought it was silly to say to this, even to this season, it has to be an NBA title. I'm all about progress. So they lost in the second round against the Boston Celtics the first time. Then they go 7 games against Kawhi Leonard and the Toronto Raptors. In the NBA, whoever has the best star most likely wins the 7-game series. 9 out of 10 times. If they were to make it to the Eastern Conference Finals and lose, I'm not happy. I just need to clarify how this works. I'm not happy, but logically, if you put yourself in GM mode, they are taking steps and growing into what you need this team to be. It doesn't go from this right to that. You don't go from point A to point C. There is a point in the middle where you need to develop, and we are going through that as we speak. That doesn't mean you can't put pressure on the guys and say, hey, listen, you are deep. You spend a lot of money. You should be going significantly far in the playoffs. I get that. I'm not saying it's okay to lose in certain spots, but you do need to understand how this works in sports. Look through the greats. The greats didn't just win every year and crush everyone from the age 18 to the end of their career. People like to only remember those moments. They remember the big moments. They remember the series where Jordan goes to the finals every single time and wins. Yeah, of course no one's going to forget about that. Why do they forget about when he loses? LeBron has lost in the finals to a Mavericks team. That shouldn't have happened. A learning curve, a learning experience. You need these guys to experience the tough moments out there. So getting back to pretty much the question here, what makes the process successful? My answer is consistently making runs deep into the playoffs. That's it. And if that ends in the championship, hallelujah, hallelujah. I'll be screaming, jumping, freaking out with the rest of you. If they don't, though, if they don't win the title, but they go to 7 Eastern Conference championships and they go to 2 finals, I'm sorry. But to me, the point of this was to not get stuck in the 8th seed, not get stuck in the 7th seed. Go out, draft high, and get players that will change your franchise. They did that. They did that. And that's the point of the process. Every year in every sport, the point heading in is winning the title. Isn't that inevitable? I mean, that is the point, to win, obviously. Not every team wins. Only one team wins. So with that being said, that doesn't mean if you don't win, every other franchise in that specific league was a complete miserable failure. It's not how it works. So, with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. Hit that thumbs up button and subscribe. And I will see you next time.